class. Today we're going to be learning about the brain. More specifically, the three parts of the brain, the four lobes of the cerebrum, and the spinal cord structure and function. First off, we'll start with the brain's three parts. Does anybody know what that would be?
The three parts of the brain are the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the brainstem.
Very good. Can anybody tell me what those parts do? I'll take that as a no. The cerebrum is the biggest part of the brain. It's responsible for all your higher thought processes, for learning, memory, language, and speech, which enables you to come to class and pay attention so well like you all do every day. The cerebellum gets info from your joints and your muscles and compares that from motor output from your cerebral cortex about where your limbs should be in correlation to where they are. But it also helps with your posture and your balance. And it makes it so your muscles can work together so you can have all those nice fluid movements for when you're at dances. Next is the brainstem, which are three parts of the brainstem, which would be your midbrain, pons, and my favorite, the medulla oblongata. Which reminds me, when I was young, I had two cats. One was called Meowdula, and the other Oblongata. So there's the midbrain, which is a relay station for tracks between the cerebrum and the spinal cord or the cerebellum. It's got reflex centers for visual, auditory, and tactile responses. The pons, which means bridge in Latin, work with the medulla oblongata to regulate your breathing. It's got reflex centers for head movements in response to visual and auditory stimuli. So if you think somebody's following you, you hear footsteps, your head might automatically look back. The pons contain bundles of axons traveling between the cerebellum and the central nervous system. The medulla oblongata has tracks ascending and descending between the spinal cord and the higher brain centers. Got reflex centers for regulating your heartbeat, your blood pressure, and your breathing. It's also got reflex centers for vomiting, coughing, sneezing, and swallowing. All those lovely bodily functions. Now, let's move on to the four lobes of the brain. Can anybody tell me what these would be?
The frontal lobe, the occipital lobe, the temporal lobe, and the parietal lobe.
Very good. Now, do you know where the lobes are located?
I do. The frontal lobe is at the top in front of the brain. The occipital lobe is at the back of the brain. The temporal lobe is at the temples of your head. And the parietal lobe is at the top of your brain.
Very good. And all of these portions of the brain have specific functions. The frontal lobe is responsible for motor coordination and higher thought. The parietal lobe controls somatosensories. The occipital is in charge of your vision interpretation, while your temporal lobe is responsible for your hearing. Any questions? Good. Now, on to the final portion of this lecture, the spinal cord. Can anyone tell me anything about the spinal cord?
Doesn't it extend from the base of the brain through an opening?
Yes! And that opening is called the foramen magnum. It goes into the vertebral canal formed by the vertebrae. The spinal nerves project between the vertebrae, which make up the vertebral column. There are fluid-filled intervertebral discs which cushion and separate the vertebrae. Now there's also a portion of the spinal cord which shows a central canal, gray matter and white matter. All the portions have a different components and responsibilities. In the gray matter, sensory and motor neurons are found. These spinal nerves are part of the peripheral nervous system. In the white matter, there are sending tracks taking info to the brain and vice versa.
What are the functions of the spinal cord?
That's a good question, Latifa. The spinal cord provides means of transportation between the brain and their peripheral nerves that leave the cord. Any more questions? It looks like that's the end of the lecture. I'll let you all go weapons free for now for the last few minutes. Mana do 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 do. Mana do 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 do. Mana do 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 do.